right, it's time for another episode of PEBAheads, and we have a very special guest this week with Scott and I. It's RJ from Crystal Lake. How are you?
Hey guys, great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. The last time we talked on the podcast format, anyway, I think it was right after you got your center fielder Burrow, and that was all the rage, and then the game changed. But he still, we'll dive into that a little deeper in the podcast. But he still looks like he's producing for you guys. So
Yeah. Glad that controversy can live on.
yeah.
So
Well,
RJ,
let's
but if you
yeah.
just start telling us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the league, and you're in California, West
Uh,
Coast?
yeah, I'm in Washington State, so
Okay.
I'm in Spokane is home base for me. I travel for work, so all over kind of like Idaho and Western Washington as well. So usually trying to export on hotel Wi-Fi is sometimes can be challenging, or
Yeah.
airport Wi-Fi. It's actually crazy because I joined the league. Gosh, I think this is roughly 10 years ish ago. So maybe 2014 or 15. Uh, the season was so see I can remember it more by season. So I joined in the off season of 23, basically. So whatever year, whatever real life year that was, I don't know. I don't remember. Uh, I keep track of time by PEBA time usually. I can remember those years better than real life. Back then, I it was hard to export actually on the road. I would sometimes have to download the file again and then reinstall it. Like, it was crazy. Like, and now it's better. It's easy. The Wi-Fi like traveling is so much easier. Every once in a while, I hit some issue where I'm like, shit, I can't export, and I'm like messaging Mike, and I'm like, damn it, it won't export. Can you please make some changes for me or whatever? Um, but yeah, that's when I joined the league.
So you joined in the season was 2023.
The yeah, the
So
23.
you won your
Yeah.
title the next season.
Yes, yes. And it's been a downslide ever since.
I'm
Yes.
looking. So you guys have 23 playoff appearances and one championship. Now, if you look at the history page, that is an incredible string of playoff
Yes.
appearances for Crystal Lake. And so
Yeah.
you entered right in the middle of a
Mhm.
fantastic run. And then
Yes.
the very next season you win it all.
Yes.
I think you
Um,
might have gotten a little spoiled there. What do you think?
so I have imposter syndrome when it comes to Brian, who rejoined our league. So Brian ran Crystal Lake before, who now is might win a championship himself. Hopefully, rooting for him. No offense to the other guy here, but but Brian. I learned a lot from Brian in looking back at how he created the team, and I just like how he ran the team, the trades he made is something I really looked at when I first joined the league to really understand how he built Crystal Lake. And he smart dude. He knows what he's doing. He's obviously successful in our league. I follow what he's done with Tempe because I really respect what he's done. Um, and so yeah, I mean I made a lot of mistakes when I took over the team, and luckily I had a buffer of good players and a good farm system to be able to weather some of those mistakes and then kind of start to create my own kind of team. So, but my team won that year actually and made one of those crazy playoff runs. I think we only won 88 or 89 games that year. And so it was an unexpected championship to say the least. It was
Still yours.
crazy.
No one can take it away from
It was crazy. I think there was like some game sevens in there. I gotta look about the history. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but I just remember the two championship series, just waiting for that download. And Ken was with me, I think both times. And I was just like running through my living room, like, holy, I can't believe this happened. Oh my God. Like, um, so yeah, it was pretty crazy to win like that. And then I had a little downturn a little bit, and then I had a good stretch of like some 100 win, kind of upper 90s seasons in the middle. But there was always one team in my division who was better than me. It was like either Fargo um, or Duluth would outdo me somehow that year. They'd win like two or more games. I think a couple seasons I lost like in a playoff, like like a one
Yeah,
game playoff.
you've been incredibly successful. I mean, I'm looking again at your history page, and there's only 4 seasons that you have not made the postseason. Only four since 2023. That's a pretty good run.
Thank you. Thank you. A lot of it's just sometimes, I think unexpected stuff. Like you try to like, you stick to a plan, but you have to be willing to accept things you can't control, and just run with them the best you can. Like injuries happen, uh, version changes happen, rule changes happen, right? You just have to accept those and just try to be flexible. It's easier said than done, obviously, but like, that's what I've tried to do is just if I disagree with, hey, the rule change or whatever, okay, this is just the landscape has changed. How are we going to adjust to this and deal with it? Because really what's important to me is honestly, I love the league. I love the group of people group of people we have, the diversity of people we have across the world, age ranges, generations, family, friends. I That's the most important thing to me is that, is the community we've created, I think, all of us. So, it is a competition. I like winning, obviously, like all of us do. But at the same time, hey, things happen. So I count myself as just lucky. I try
Is
to, yeah.
is there anybody in the league that you bounce ideas off of or get some advice from when it comes to the league and playing?
Ken, who's running Madison, he's one of my best friends. Um, and he actually got me to join the league originally. Ken was in the league before I was. And him and I think we had just met maybe a year before that or within that same year. I had just moved to Spokane, and his wife is friends with my wife. Um, and so that's how we met. How most guys meet each other, through your significant other, right?
Right.
End up being your friend.
Either
Uh,
that way or through this thing.
right. Um, so he was like, "Hey, you love baseball. You got to check out this game, right?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so he was like, "Check this game out." And all of a sudden I'm playing this game nonstop. Like I'm up till 4 a.m. like running simulations and historical teams and all this stuff. And he's like, "Hey, you really like it. You should join this league, right?" So he got me addicted, for sure. So Ken and I talk about this all the time, real baseball and fake baseball, all the time. Jaime will say, "What are you talking about?" Jaime is a good friend. We used to work at my law firm, as an intern as well. Uh, I talk to Jaime a lot as well. We got him to join. Um, he joined through our office. So I was like, "Hey, I know you love sports and you're a nerd like myself. You like want to join?" But yeah, Ken and I, even when Ken wasn't in the league, I would ask his advice, a lot. So yeah, Ken's the guy I talk to the most. Yeah.
So when I look at your team, I looked up the stats for your season, and congratulations on another great season, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, so you're seventh in runs scored, you were second in runs against, second in defensive efficiency, first in zone rating, and third in errors. I looked at your park. Your park looks like a pitcher's park to me. 967 for average and 992 for overall for home runs. So not an incredibly, strong pitcher's park, but not exactly a strong hitter's park. So I would say it leans towards a pitcher's park. Would you say that you're pitching and defense oriented? Is that how you like to construct your team?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, I think, if you're looking under the hood, my strategy. Um, one thing that I changed, that was not always my strategy. Um, I would say I started leaning toward that strategy maybe 8 seasons ago, perhaps roughly. And it was just through trial and error. I started noticing trends, with how the pitching behaved depending on your defense. Um, One year, Bakersfield, I forget which season this was. I'll have to look it up. But Bakersfield had the best pitching in the league by far. But the pitchers were not star pitchers by any stretch of the imagination. And however, their defense was carrying these guys. So if you look at the FIP, you would be like, huh. And you just look down the road and go, interesting. And I saw that basically they were getting like a run less off their defense. It was crazy that season. And it happened to be the season that Steve Hott was on the team, just so you know. That's how the Steve Hott story started.
Yeah,
Okay, Steve
I
Hott.
remember that.
Steve Hott was like the outlier of this great pitching staff, right? You got all these great pitchers, and then Steve Hott, who's now the manager of Crystal Lake, by the way. Uh, um, and so, yeah, I modeled that after Bakersfield. I saw that, hey, defense matters. It can lose you a run too. It can go the opposite way. And I noticed I had a year where my shortstop was starting to decline physically, and my pitching was getting killed. And I was like, what the hell? These are great pitchers. What's going on here? And so I made a move and I put a like a strong defensive shortstop in who was like a below average hitter. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, look at that. The pitching's doing good again. Um, and
Yeah, it looks
so,
like you're
yeah,
strung up the middle, like we've talked about on other podcasts.
yeah,
Burrow, the famous Burrow. Uh, I find it really interesting when I looked at him, his defensive stats today. So my scouts got him very high in range, but just
yep,
average in error and arm.
yeah,
But yet, if you look at his zone rating, it's astronomical. I mean,
yes, yes.
and then so it looks like you're pretty strong center field, shortstop, and second base.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the ZR. Huge fan of that stat when I'm evaluating defense. Efficiency number two. What good is it if they have a great arm and don't make mistakes if they can't get to the ball? That's I like to look at some of those other defensive stats, like I think the impossible. There's like the ranges of different
Yep.
potentials, right? Yeah, I like to look at those too, especially when evaluating defense, especially in those premium positions where I think it matters a lot. Like center, up the middle, center field matters the most, in my opinion. What I've seen in the stats, how the game, there's a difference between real life and the game. This is how the game handles it. Um, and so, yeah, that can make your. And then here's I'll share my theory about it, and people can disagree about this, but I think your defense is cheaper than star pitching monetarily, and when you don't have unlimited funds, you can afford, I think, more average pitching that can be more successful with a stronger defense. And so that's been the way I've allocated funds over the years.
I think
Is that
shortstop
yeah,
has gotten really expensive though. I think,
yes.
so I'm not sure that the league has collectively bought into the center field theory yet, but it
Yeah.
seems like they've really bought into the shortstop theory. So
Yes.
we are paying, all of us are paying through the nose for good defensive shortstops, even
Hmm.
ones that don't hit very well.
Yep. Yep. It's yeah, people I think have picked up on that for sure. It's hard to find a shortstop that can hit well in our league,
Right.
uh, which is just weird.
Yeah, we've talked about before. If you can get if you can get an 800 OPS plus or an 80, I'm sorry, an 80 OPS plus, uh, and good fielding on a shortstop, you're well ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's somebody you got to try to grow in your farm system because it is that expensive. I try to do that. Catcher as well, same thing. Catchers and shortstops, center field too. It's tough to get a guy that can hit above average. If they hit average, I think that's amazing, in my opinion, at least in our
Well,
game.
and drafting and developing those players are becoming more, I would say, harder to
Yeah.
do now as well because I've seen guys where it's like, oh, I could probably get this defensive first player in the fourth round, and they're being taken in the second round, and it's like I can't really, I don't get it, but I'm not going to criticize it because if you have a need in your system for it, and there's a player there, your evaluation of your organization is different than how I view it or how someone else does. So I think that's the key too, is like when we're talking about when you look at like the draft and you're like, why did somebody take this guy in the first round? It's like you have to look at it through their lens and not Not the outside looking in, or I don't know, ask them. That'd be a good thing to do too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I would definitely agree with that. It has, and that has changed over the years. I think Scott has seen that. It has. It was not always that way, for
Right.
sure. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's just the game engine changes the way it handles things, and you just got to be flexible and understand. Okay, now this is what we really got to focus on. You know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I mean, I've seen it when your defense is terrible in the middle infield, your pitching suffers significantly. Um, second base as well. Like I've experimented with really good second basemen, but they kind of stink defensively, and it is more harmful than helpful in my opinion. At least my experience in my team. Um, one
So
thing that
when
yeah
it comes to evaluating the defense, do you agree with the general rule that Sean and I and others have talked about on this podcast that range is the most important of the ratings?
yeah 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 I agree. Yeah, yeah. It's the way the game treats it. You know. Um, then efficiency second for me. Is really it. Just like I said earlier, if they can't get to the ball, what does it matter? And that now a guy with really good range could make up for like the guy next to him a little bit. I've seen that too. I've kind of seen that in my outfield a little bit. So you can get away with maybe a left or right fielder, maybe he's not as good if your center field is strong, because that guy can cover that range a little better. Um, Sometimes you see if you watch the replays, you can see it.
Right.
The guy, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, a guy goes through a wall. It's just like,
Yeah.
whoa. But yeah, I mean, and I've just picked that up by trial and error. I think it's just seeing what happens in my own team. One thing that actually, Scott, I could not. You brought up my field being slightly pitcher friendly. One thing that I could not figure out for the longest time is why my pitchers were giving up home runs like insanely giving up home runs some seasons. I was like, I couldn't understand it. I was like, what's going on here? And that's one thing I've focused on significantly the last couple of years is having pitchers who do not give up home runs. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes guys would come to Crystal Lake who didn't have that history and they would get shelled. And I'd be like, what the hell's going on? Something I
Well,
just couldn't explain.
it's even more frustrating if they got good ratings and then they're still not producing. That's the
Right.
thing that always makes me very
Hmm.
frustrated is,
Yeah.
you get a good, say, 8 or 9 in home runs allowed, and then they give up 35 home runs, and you're like, what?
Yeah. What's going on here? So this season was the best one I've had for the HR/9 stats. Um, and I focused, it's taken a while to get there. Lupe was the one exception to the rule on a move I made in that regard. He gave up a little bit more than I like, but he's more talented. So I kind of made an exception there just because he's stronger otherwise. But I've kind of tried to focus on that because I just couldn't understand it because of my park ratings don't really tend that way. I don't know if it's my competition generally, this Sovereign League, no clue. So I've focused on that lately. Um, it finally paid off for me. Yeah. I'll probably get
So,
shelled next year. Who knows?
so when it comes to roster construction, I looked at your team. I looked at the 26-man roster. So I think it was your playoff team or your playoff roster. And of those 26 players, 14 of them you acquired via trade. 7 of them were free agent signs, and only 5 of them were draft picks slash scouting discovery. Essentially, international free agents. People that you brought in through the beginning of their career and then developed them. So you've made a ton of trades for your roster construction. Is that primarily your strategy? Because I looked at mine, I'm almost the inverse. I have 6 via trade, 7 free agents, and 12 people that I have drafted or developed. So is that a strategy or is that just luck that's how this current team was constructed? I
Um,
looked at your top 5 or your top 4 pitchers that you had for your rotation in the playoffs. All 4 of them you got by trade.
that's
Like
on
all
purpose. Pitching, that's on purpose. I'm not a really good drafter. I suck at drafting. I don't know. Maybe a bad talent evaluator. I've been let down so many times by some first round picks that have just been busts. So
But
I
you
don't know if
must
it's,
must be pretty good at trading, right?
I don't trade a lot. Like, I'm not one of those guys who trades a ton. I trade strategically, maybe a couple times a year I trade. Maybe 2 to 3 trades a year, maybe. I think I'd have to look, but I'm not like trading a lot anymore. Um, I'd say I'm getting better at drafting lately. But for the longest time, I just was having busts left and right. And inexplicably, maybe it's just me. So I think that I've had to do that out of necessity. I think I'm a better evaluator of guys in the minors than I am in the feeder leagues. Some guys are really good at that, and I'm not, I don't seem to hit well on those evaluations. But I've tried to get develop a core. I did a rebuild a few seasons ago, and Sean was a nice trading partner when I was doing that rebuild. I fed him some pieces there.
Yep.
Uh, but I tried to keep, I had a young core of guys that I thought were going to be a cornerstone to that in my team. Um, those guys would be my first baseman, Bao my first baseman, which is not a position like this is dime a dozen, right? It was just luck. I didn't expect him to develop like that, but he ended up being a star. So he's a stud. So I was like, okay, cool. I guess he's the guy, right? Um, and then Sanu, my current right fielder, he's one of those guys too, who I thought was going to be like a long-term piece. I was trying to make him a third baseman actually, and it just didn't work out that way. Just because of other players I had, and the need was more in the outfield, and he developed better in the outfield than third base. He can play third base well, but he kind of ended up being there. And then looking at my roster, yeah, those two guys were kind of the corner pieces.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
two all other awards
yeah,
for Sanu.
yeah. He's awesome defensively, and he can hit. He's great. And then yeah, so those two guys were kind of the corner pieces for me. Some other guys kind of let me down. I thought Mika Hill was going to be a guy, but he ended up not really being that guy. He's more of a defensive kind of gap filler for me for injuries. Same thing with Dylan Anderson. I thought he might have been a guy, but didn't quite shake out the way I thought. So I've had the plug and play. I had a big injury this year. Angel Franco got hurt like real early on. I think it was spring training or something like that. Broke his leg, so he was out for the season. So I really had to scramble to figure out what I was going to do with that, and ended up trading for a guy who was probably average, Dennis Johnson. So a play that I normally would not have made, but I kind of had to fill a hole because that was a lot of production lost unexpectedly.
Well,
So
it worked, winning the division
yeah.
again, you know.
Yeah, I ran away with it. I was shocked. I was like, "What? The Great Lakes is usually comes down in the last sim." um, I was expecting some of the other guys to actually be better this year than their records. Um, I think maybe there was some purposely not doing as well purposely, perhaps, but which is fine. But I did not expect to win it to that extent. That this was extraordinary performance. Really, I did not expect this. Yeah.
Well, I think I'd like to ask you about a certain player that nobody on this podcast has ever heard of, but Carl Burrow had a very interesting signing, you know, much talked about when you signed him to the famous de-escalating contract. Uh, what do you think? I mean, he did have a pretty good season this year.
Yeah, like that Six Wars.
Six
Nice.
WAR, yeah. He was down last year. I
Yeah.
didn't look like he quite played up to par, but seems like the contract is paying off for you. Any regrets about signing Burrow to that big contract?
Well, it's working out, so no. I guess I can Monday morning quarterback it. He's not what I expected because the game engine changed and affected him. His ratings went down. If you look at his production in 2040, it was like gangbuster hitter, right? Like 800 OPS, 80 walks, like killer. And that was what I hoped for, to be honest. Okay. I was not hoping for a guy who's maybe a slightly above average hitter. Uh, so to that end, he's not the game changed, and so I've just accepted that. That's fine, right? But he's still strong defensively, like I anticipated. And so he's one of those guys who's an above average hitter who is strong defensively in a premium position. So I love the guy in that regard. He hit more home runs this year. It was like 23 maybe, I think. 10 more than last year. So I think that drove his OPS up a little bit. Um, and so he still gets on base pretty well, but not what I was expecting. That I rating went down, and the power's not what it was. So, but the strategy, I would say this was a flexible move because at the time I signed him, I was kind of in a rebuild situation where I had a lot of budget space because I had jettisoned some salary. And I was like, why not?
What was his first year was like 40 million or something like that? It's a de if you could pull up the
Contract?
yeah, it's a de-escalating contract.
Yeah.
Yes, 60 million the first year, 60 and
60.
Yeah. Yeah,
million.
that was the one that made everybody go,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
What else was I going to do with that $60 million? I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
you don't want to give it back
that's
to the
it.
owner.
Yeah. And the other thing with it too is like I've noticed if you're going into a rebuild and you stop spending money, the owner takes more of it away. So
Yeah.
if you keep spending the money but you still are rebuilding,
Mhm.
your budget doesn't get drastically reduced. And I think
Right.
that's part of the problem we see not just in our league but in online leagues in general is that people go full on tank and then they don't realize that your
Yeah.
budget's going down like if you're not spending that money and when it's time to compete again the budget doesn't go up as fast as you normally want it to.
Totally. Totally. That's totally correct. And so, yeah, I got to spend the money. Some guys do international free agent signings. They blow all that money there. I've seen other guys, you can do it in different ways, right? And I just happen to be positioned where, the core group I was expecting at the time to mature like they are today, um, that many seasons ago, this was the position that I was still searching for. Um, and here's the history behind it, okay? So, when I first joined the league, I made a trade. All right. Pedro Flores. I traded him to Greg. I regret that trade in every bone of my body regrets that trade. It was a terrible trade. Greg got the best of me. Greg will claim it won me a championship. It's not true, Greg. Okay. But all right. The pitcher I traded for did not have a good playoffs. Okay. And since that time, I've been searching for a center fielder. It took me a decade to find a center fielder, decade in PEBA time. Uh, and so, yeah, when I had the opportunity, I was trying to develop one and couldn't develop one. It just wasn't happening. I was like, hey, let's make this move, take a chance. Um, you gotta, I'm a little conservative and every once in a while I'll take a swing. So that's the reason behind it.
Yeah, I think it was a good move. You know,
Thanks.
again,
It could have blown up in my face too.
yeah,
You never
an
know. You never
injury
know.
an injury would have sucked, but the fact that you were paying him the most amount of money in years where you had the most financial flexibility is a
Right.
smart.
Yeah. Yeah, that was yeah, on purpose. And yeah, because you know that as those other younger guys develop, you're gonna start paying them more, right? So I've had to extend some guys on some bigger contracts. And so I have that flexibility to do that with the core group of guys I have right now, because of that. Right. And that was planned. I try to plan out financially 4 seasons ahead. That's usually I try to manage the money that way. Um, so I'm always keeping an eye on what is it gonna look like in, you know, 2045 or 46 financially. You have to look at that,
Yeah, I
right?
look at my salaries page, right? That one that's got the years spelled out pretty regularly, and I look several years ahead and go, okay, what's the estimate here?
Yeah. Yeah. Because hey, these guys are coming off ARB, right? And if I want to keep that guy, well, how much am I gonna have to pay this guy, right? And I kind of pencil that in, if I want to, and then I can kind of project what that salary looks like those kind of years out, you know. It doesn't always work out the way you think it will, but you have to be looking at it because then you're
Have
going to
you
be, yeah.
have you ever had real trouble financially where you said, "Oof, man, I have overextended myself. Things are getting a little tight," and you basically forced yourself into trading some high priced players?
Um, yeah, I have a couple times. Um, I'm not a huge market team. I'm I think a big market team, so I can still spend, but not crazy spending. I mean, I'm spending right now significantly, but it's because this is the window. So I'm gonna do it right now, but I know we're gonna pay the price for that later. It's just what it is. But yeah, I've had to back out of some things and sell to do that a couple times. Yeah, make some moves that way, unfortunately. But I planned around that though. I'm expecting to do it. So you just gotta make sure I have the pieces to get out of some things just in case. So I mean, I signed some contracts I normally wouldn't have signed this off season just because it's the window that I have with some of my core group. So I might have to get out of some of those deals if they don't work out. But you know, it is what it is. I'm out of Florida budget.
Well, the good news looks like, at least for the next 2 years, you're going to have your
Yeah.
core group of players together and then have some decisions on who to extend and who to keep. And but that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, you got to be careful on your long-term deals, being stuck on some of that stuff. It could really harm you long term. You got to be, I don't like to be stuck on a lot past 3 years. Because you got to be flexible. That's kind of my theme, I guess, is you got to be flexible, and I don't want to be stuck on too many long-term deals. I've seen too many teams where they've got a declining guy in his late 30s, early 40s that they're paying 30 million to. And it's just, oh, that would be so painful. And you're stuck with that guy. Nobody's taking that off your books.
No.
You know, somebody
Well,
you
then,
might be able to get rid of 10 or 15 million dollars, but 30, forget about it. Nobody's making that trade with you.
and like when I first joined the version, I think it was either 23 or 24 for the version. And since then, they have really detrimentally affected older players, like in their production versus what historically this league had been. And that's the part that just like really irks you, where it's like you got to adjust, but you plan on, oh, I signed this 36-year-old to a 3-year contract, and I'm seeing all these other 39-year-olds that are producing. I'm okay. And then version switch, boom. Nope, you're not okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's going to be a purge this offseason of guys who are over 35. Um, Sorry, players union. But
Yeah.
age discrimination is legal in PEBA.
Yeah.
I tried not to get stuck in those deals. And those I looked at those guys as rentals, perhaps. I've done, you see some of those and you're like, hey, maybe this will work out. I'll sign them to a bigger 1 year deal
Yeah.
uh, than rather make it 2 or 3. It might be a look more attractive to have that lower salary for 2 to 3 years, but I don't know. I'd rather spend the money now than get rid of the guy if it doesn't work out. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you're like, damn, I can't resign this guy. He's asking for 10 million now because he had a good season. I'm like, oh well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, West Virginia had a guy this year who's 43 years old. That's the oldest, looks like that's the oldest player. Alejandro Luan, I think is how you pronounce it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think Greg is probably emotionally attached to him.
Yeah, it looks like it. But I mean, 43, and I mean, he didn't light the world on fire, but he wasn't dead weight. He had a positive WAR, not much, but positive WAR.
Yeah, yeah. I think his potential, that's a Hall of Fame guy, right? I think statistically. So I understand why he's hanging on to him. Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's a old trade that Greg made in 2025. Look at that. Wow. No figure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I want to bring up a guy that we traded. It was part of one of our trades, and want to see what your thoughts are on why he sucked last year, other than age. I don't understand how the game is working with ratings versus production anymore. I used to think I had a pretty good understanding of it, and that if production started going down, you would eventually see ratings start going down. But with Lorenzo Castaneda, I do not understand. I understand the defense going down because the defense actually has gone down, but from an offensive perspective, with a high contact, high avoid K and I being still at 6, I don't get the drop. So I'm
Dude, that's
what
crazy.
my yeah, I don't get it. Like, how do you go from a 300 hitter to a 220 guy and there's no ratings drop?
Yeah, without an injury, it makes no
Yeah,
sense. Like, it's not like he had a concussion and now he can't see anymore, or
yeah.
like he broke his shoulder. I mean, that's like, yeah,
Well, it's like
that's inexplicable why your
yeah,
production will be in half.
like he went from a one of his highest WAR seasons ever the previous year at 5.1 WAR to a negative 1.6 WAR, like with no injury, nothing.
Dude, that's inexplicable. Yeah, that's crazy. There's some things you just can't, we just don't know, man. I think you just have to accept that you can try to figure things out. And I guess it's actually important. I mean, this is an exception to the rule because this is inexplicable, but like you got to look at your stat history and trends in the stats. And then understand when the game changed versions. So to understand why those stats changed the way they did is important, right?
Yeah,
So like you gotta know that history a little bit. So if I'm looking at production from 2039, I gotta understand that was a different version,
yeah,
right? And look at it a different way. Also, you need to understand where that player was playing. So if it's a pitcher in Greg's Park, for instance, easy example, you got to know that guy's got the most friendly pitching park in the league. So of course his numbers are going to look better, right? You've got to
yep,
dig a little deeper under the hood if you're thinking of trading or picking up a free agent that may be pitched in that park, right? So yeah, it's you got to look at the big picture.
well, I'm not regretting our trade. I think it was
I'm glad
good
to hear
for
that.
both parties, but
Yeah, and you
yeah,
got a lot of production the year before, but that's crazy. Something crazy things happen like that. So I traded a player to Ken in the off season for like 5 million in cash. I wish I remember the name. I wrote an article about the guy because he pissed me off so much. He retired 2 days later, the next sim. The guy I gave Ken 5 million in cash, and the player retired.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like, dude. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and find that article. So I wrote an article like about him being corrupt, running for Jacksonville mayor or something crazy, just because I was annoyed.
It's the only way we can get back at him.
That's right.
yep.
That's right. So those inexplicable things happen sometimes, and you can either get mad about it or just roll with it. And there's no sense in getting mad about it, right? That's what good does that do you? So
Well, yeah, ultimately, most things in this league, it's like you've said multiple times, you just adjust, and that's the new normal, and you adjust, and there's no
yeah,
reason to.
yeah,
You can be mad a little bit at first, but then it's like
yeah.
I still want to be part of the
Hmm.
league and the group aspect of it, and
Hmm. Yep.
competition wise, it's right up there. So,
Yeah, the most successful guys and the guys that have been around a long time are really good at that. And I follow I follow a bunch of guys in the league that I try to see what they're doing to see what kind of trends or how they're doing. So, like Christian and Fargo, I follow him very carefully because he's such a good drafter. I like to see what he's up to. He's very quiet as well. So I follow what he does. I follow what Kevin does. He's been around a long time. Um, I try to see what those guys are up to, see if I can learn something from it. Um, you know, since Brian rejoined, I said that I follow what he does because he's really good at building team. So those are some of the guys that I follow more specifically. Um, but I like to see what the other guys are doing because I don't know everything. I like to try to learn something from everybody. Yeah.
well, that's the hard part too, is like you want you want to talk to other people and pick their brain on things, but you also like don't want to give up too much either. Or it's like
Yeah, yeah.
I know Scott
And
and
that's
I
like,
talk about it all the time where it's like, are you seeing the same trend on certain things? And it's like, yeah.
yeah,
Do we want to really like expand upon it too much? Probably not. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think, I've shared a lot about my strategy. I don't think that's like secret to
yeah,
the best, but like I'm not gonna tell you, oh, I'm thinking of trading for this, I'm like
yeah,
the specific player moves, yeah, they're gonna hide that, my cards to my chest on that kind of stuff. But as far as like general strategy, you're gonna see it anyway. So why not share that with you, right?
yeah. If
You
you're
guys
paying
already knew
attention,
you guys already looked at the stats and Scott's like, hey, I see your defense is really good. Look what RJ does,
yeah,
Well, I would say Tempe is not following our strategy on defensive shortstops.
No.
If you
no,
look at his guy, he said basically, you know what? You can keep your defense. I'm going to have a guy who can hit the shit out of the ball.
Yeah, yeah, I know, man. Which is interesting because Brian, when I took over the team, kind of had that focus. We had a
I
strong
mean, he's
shortstop.
extremely
Yeah,
productive, right? Bob
right.
Ellerby, right?
Yeah.
Extremely productive, but man, those defensive numbers are oof. He has a minus 17 zone rating, almost minus 8. That's
What this guy's WAR would be if he was good defensively,
yeah,
oh yeah,
no, you're right. He'd be what, a 7?
at
Even if he's
least.
an average
Yeah,
defender, his
yeah,
his WAR would be amazing.
yeah, yeah. It's a 3.9 this year, just basically on his offensive production.
Yeah, and so that WAR is being dragged down considerably by his
Yeah.
stone glove.
Hmm.
I know Brian listens to the podcast every once in a while, but I mean, when I'm looking at Ellerby, it's like if you could find just a defensive first shortstop and then move him to
But yeah,
third or second,
right.
like he probably does become a six war guy just by a move to a different position.
If you look at, I like to compare the ERA and the FIP just to evaluate defense a little bit. And if you look at his pitching, it's not that bad. I There's not a big difference, really.
Maybe not a lot
Um,
of ground ball pitchers.
yeah, maybe. But it's not horrific difference. But yeah, I focus on ground ball pitchers myself just because of the inexplicable home run problem we have in our park that cannot be
Yeah.
explained by the dimensions of the park.
Yeah, me too. All things being equal, I'd rather have a ground ball hitter or ground ball pitcher than a fly ball.
Yeah, yeah. Home runs are killers, man. That blow ups the stats so easily. Um, yeah, yeah, it's not really explainable sometimes, you know. Yeah. That's it's pretty that's you know what, I appreciate that because if it was so predictable, would this be any fun?
Right.
Yeah,
No, if it was just
right.
yeah, if it was just oh, I have higher rated players than you, so I win
Oh,
every
I win. I win, you lose.
yeah.
Right, right.
So, we've talked about your home park. Do you look at the other parks in your division too when kind of game planning against other teams?
I do in regards to who is the competition that I might face in the postseason, if I am lucky enough to be in the postseason, or I so like the guys in Rising Sun and Desert Hills. Um, and uh, so I would say like Mike's Park is that park where if you have high contact guys that are fast, that's going to be a problem to face, and you need to kind of be ready to adjust to that. Um, but I think you can't really build your team around that because you're going to play the majority of the games in your own park, right? So statistically, you want to win that, right? So I think you still got to build your team around that statistically.
Yeah,
Um,
you're not getting to the playoffs if you can't win in your own park.
yeah, yeah. So you got to build your team with keeping that in mind, right? Statistically. Um, and also, the majority of the pitchers are right-handed. So statistically, you're gonna have to be a little bit more successful against right-handers, right? And this is this little things I think win you maybe two or three extra games. that you need to look at. So when I faced Tempe in the playoffs, I was surprised we actually went 5 games. I thought he was going to destroy us because I did not match up well against left-handers. Um, and worse than I expected this season. So I was trying to adjust and balance it, and it wasn't working out that way. And so I looked at it statistically, and he had destroyed us that way in the regular season. And I was like, oh, I'm smoked. Like this is it. I'm smoked. He's got 3 great left-handed pitchers. I'm done. And so I was surprised actually that it went the way it did. And this stuff happens in the playoffs. They've got to write something in the code that screws up, that does something like
It
this.
has, yeah.
Yeah. So I was surprised it went 5 because I was looking at these matchups and it was like, I've got no chance. Like I'm up at like 3 o'clock in the night looking at every little stat, trying to find a matchup, and I could not find one. I was like, well, we're just gonna let it ride. I was telling Ken this. I was like, Ken, I've got nothing. So I was surprised it went 5, honestly. Um, yeah. So those are little things I think, but I think those are things that you look at once you think you've got a team you like that's going to have a shot, right? You got to look a little bit more at those things. Um, but I like to play the odds that are more favorable for me. So that'll be my own park and right-handed pitching. How are
Well,
we
I
going to beat
know,
up on them? Yeah.
like Scott and I have talked about this multiple times on various podcasts, but getting from that 85 win total to 90, 95, those are the type of things you were just talking about where that
Yeah.
get you to that level is
Right.
that level of detail.
Right. 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 How am I going to get an extra game out of this player? How am I going to get an extra game out of this pitcher? That kind of thing. I mean, I like having loading up with left-hander relievers the best I can, so that I can flip some lineups late in the later innings. I think that wins you a couple extra games if you can play some matchups that way as well, especially down the stretch. So I purposely, and even left-handed pitchers who maybe aren't that good, if you can get a favorable matchup, you're still gonna maybe have an at least even or slightly advantageous matchup.
Yeah,
Um,
versus throwing that righty out there that you
yeah,
don't know what's
yeah,
going to happen.
yeah. Unless he's like your stud reliever, right? I think the exception would be your stud, but um, my reliever melted down in the playoffs twice in a row now, so I don't know what I'm gonna do about that. Man, I don't know,
I
dude.
feel you. I feel you. I'm in the same ballpark there.
Gosh, that is something that I've had a history of this, where my stud reliever just melts down in key situations. Uh,
It's yeah. You go all year long and it's like you manage their innings, you do try to do whatever it takes, and then it's the postseason and
yep.
I
Some
don't
of
know
the
what it
older guys
is.
might be familiar with this guy, Ramon Contreras, the Doberman. I think Mike will remember him. Melted down in a game 7 against Aurora, and I got rid of him instantly the next season. I was like, bye, I'm done with you.
Well, I noticed you've got the three stopper
Yeah,
set up in your bullpen. Do you run that all season long, or is that something you
yeah,
do? Okay.
yeah, yeah. And I ran that in the playoffs too. Last year I went with the closer strategy, and I said, you know what, if I'm doing this in the regular season, let's keep this in the playoffs because I like the matchups. So, um, yeah, I kind of like the stopper strategy now. I've done that now 4 seasons, I believe. And it was just something I picked up on somebody's podcast. They were showing some of the things they do, somebody outside of our league, and I was like, hey, let me try this. And it's a pretty cool way to eat a bunch of innings. If you see those guys are pitched to like slightly over 100 innings this season, which is a lot of work, but you can get a lot of work out of guys who don't have the stamina. All right. You do it in a extra inning here and there, right? Adds up after a season. And then I think it's great for your relievers. You can, and your starters, I mean, you can manage their workload. And I think you can maybe perhaps statistically reduce injury chances, and lengthen the life of some of your starters that way. Um, that's the theory. I don't know if it's true. Okay,
No, I
but
mean it makes sense. The thing I've run into is I feel like here the pitching is heavily weighted better than most offenses. So
yeah,
the struggle that I run into is you set a pitch count on your starting pitcher, they're still going 7+ innings, like very like the good starting pitcher. So it's like trying to balance where, yeah, there's a guy I have my starter in the game because they're better than most of my relief pitchers, but you also don't want to, like you said, risk their injury
yeah,
risk. So you're balancing that much. So,
yeah. The aggressive hook checkbox in the strategy is something you have to use it because the game engine is not going to
oh yeah, they'll go
stick
like
to the yeah, yeah. Got to check that
130
off.
pitches on a starter.
Yeah. I do the 27 batter faced limit as well, and then the pitch count. I just try to throw everything I can to make the manager pull that guy. Hopefully, one of those things will click for the manager.
Yeah, I definitely do the aggressive tiredness hook too,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's what in my playoff matchup against Florida, if that's what ended up having
Yeah.
Padilla go out for the eighth inning for I don't know why, and give up 6 runs when he already had the game won. But it's just like that's where I wish, and there's no way to do it really, but you might be able to do it in the World Series. But if you could live sim and let you decide, like, I'm pulling this guy out of the game right now. Like, I don't want you to like sim each at bat decision or if I'm going to take a pitch or not. But if you could at least have your bullpen going and being like, I'm not throwing to, Vito. I'm not doing it. Like that would be great, but there's no way to do it. I mean, it would slow things down so much. It'd be
Totally,
fun
totally.
for the
It'd be
World
fun.
Series, but
That'd be fun to watch if we could do that live, right?
yeah.
Do it live on Zoom. Um, one of the things I'm not sure about this. This is just one of my theories. I don't know if this is real or not, but your bench coach affects things, I think, more than you think they do. Um, I changed my bench coach, and the team started running a little closer to the way I wanted it to run. So I think you got to pay attention to some of those trends or the attributes of your bench coach as well. Um, and so I've seen that can make a difference. I overpaid for one just because I liked his attributes. Um, and I moved one down because things were not going the way I liked. Did that affect it? I have no idea, but uh, it worked the way I wanted it to. So I think you got to look at that as well as your manager to see how they get along and how they run your team as well, you know, as far as
Well,
how they plug guys in. Yeah.
yeah. And speaking of coaching, I know it's come up in the past where people have brought up the comment, well, I've offered 10 guys and none of them they don't even want to they don't have any interest in coaching my team. I'm pretty sure there's a setting. I know for sure there's a setting in 26. I haven't gone and looked. I guess I could pull it up right now in 25, but there's a filter now that you can put in where it will tell you if they're even interested at the level.
Right.
And that to me has been a nice change because up until that point, yeah, it would be frustrating. You're going through here, you're like, oh, this guy has everything that I possibly would want, and nope, not interested. But
Mhm. Mhm.
then,
Yep.
since we just were talking about coaching, that just
Did you
triggered
see
that.
did you see Steve Hott's salary this year? Is
Is it six?
$50,000?
How that is hilarious. I'm looking at it right now. Can you imagine if that was real life? How can you pay your manager 50 grand?
Because he's Steve Hott. um, I obviously he was on a minor league coaching deal when I elevated him when my original. Actually, I elevated him when my manager retired. So he was still.
You're
Yeah,
gonna have to re-sign him after next year.
yeah. He's gonna
I
actually
hope
have a
he
little
asks
salary.
you for an arm and a leg.
Let me see if he'll do it now. Let me see. Let's see here. No, he's not, and he's not interested right now. He's holding out on me. All right, so we'll
He's like,
see.
no, 50 grand's enough.
Imagine.
50 grand's enough. It's too much. If I could give some money back, I'll do it.
Yeah. but like my bench coach is, a million and some change, and I just signed into an extension for 670,000 for 3 years. So these guys need better agents.
Clearly. I
Well,
want to know who pays when the bench coach and the manager go out to lunch. I mean, I would hope the bench coach says, no, no, Steve, I got the check.
We know who the real manager is here at Crystal Lake, okay? It's really Sean Barris, okay? Steve Hott, yeah. Yeah, so
he's
it's
there.
cool
He's
stuff.
there for the press conferences.
Basically, yeah. He's there for the quote. Yeah.
Yeah.
We gotta come yeah, I gotta come up we gotta come up with some more articles for Steve Hott. He wanted to get rid of spring training last year. It's a waste of time, stuff like
Yes.
that.
Let's just play the games.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Well, we got 8 minutes left here. I want to get your thoughts since you just ran through playing Tempe at the championship matchup that we have going on coming up. What does Tempe have to do to
Man.
win a game? Yeah, against Florida.
Oh man, dude, he's got some stud hitters I mean batters. Dude, I hesitate to predict. Some of these teams are on a run, man. They're on a run. So I don't know. He's got really strong left-handed pitching though, purposefully. That's I he when I took over Crystal Lake, we had some really strong left-handers, like the Hall of Famer Yogi Robles was a Brian selection, I believe, back in the day. So um, I believe, I don't know, he can tell me if this is correct, but what I looked at, I think he was leaning more on his pitching than not expecting his batters to do what they're doing at this point. I mean, they're great players, but like I think the hitting is something else on that team.
I think that's going to be the key uh,
Yeah,
to competing with Florida
yeah,
any matchup. I mean,
yeah.
you can't go in and just try to win by limiting runs. Obviously, that's important, but Florida's going
Yeah,
to slug, so you're going to have to outslug them.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. hmm Yeah, he's got a good. I think he's a team that could do it.
yeah,
They really are. It's a favorable matchup for him, I think. I mean, Florida's Florida, but like there's a good matchup there. He has a shot, you
yeah.
know. Yeah. There'd be some matchups where I'd be like, oh, this is not gonna, but I think he's got the pitchers that could, keep it bearable where his run production could compete with Florida. Yeah.
Well, Scott,
Uh,
what do you
let me see.
think? What's your prediction?
Pull up his team here.
It's hard to bet against Florida, right? But I
How
hope but I hope they don't win.
how great would it be for Michael Roberts to
Revenge.
be the guy? Yeah, yeah, that would be pretty crazy, right? Um, that would be really interesting. I know he's not the guy, the current GM of Florida is not the guy who made that trade, but that would still, that would still bite at me a little bit. I mean, Michael Roberts is amazing, and he's been, I mean, just on fire in the playoffs, right? So that's a, future Hall of Fame player. But that would be really cool to see if Tempe wins.
Well, and I think
That'd
too, Florida with the series with the Claymores going 6 games rather than 7 gives them a little bit more of an advantage than they already had because you're going to get Brewster going 2 games, possibly 3 if you need him,
be.
and
But
that's
Tempe wiped the floor up with Aurora. Was it 4-1 in the games, right? So he's all of his players have been resting for
they're
longer.
rested. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean
Yeah.
they're both going to face each other, I think at peak strength. I just, again, Florida has won so many championships, it's tough to bet against them.
Yep. Yep. That's it's Ken's legacy. Still chugging along right now.
I was going to say, does
Uh,
Ken have a board where he just has all of his championships up on there and then he just keeps adding to them because you're like, well, that's my guy. That's my guy.
Certainly should. Certainly should if he doesn't. Yep. He does have a poster I made him of the old name. Uh, I think when he won his first championship as a GM, I made him a poster of Florida, and it's got all the roster on it. It's pretty
Nice.
cool. Yeah, it's his 2025 season, I think it was. He beat me in that championship. 7 games.
So do you think he's your biggest competition moving forward in the next 2 years in your division, or is it still pretty wide open? I mean, there's a lot of when I look at your division, there's a lot of teams that are bunched up very closely that could any year, like you were saying at the beginning, heading in, any one of you probably could have taken the division depending on the route you
Yeah,
wanted to go.
I was surprised about Duluth. There's a lot of young talent on that team. I was surprised about how that season went for them. Um, I did not expect that. You know, Ken is rebuilding and reformulating that team. He knows what he's doing. So hopefully I'm rebuilding while he's winning, so I don't have to deal with that. Um, but I expect Duluth and Fargo to make some big comebacks. I think, sorry, Jaime, but Kalamazoo's in a precarious situation right now. It's going to take a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
Fargo was. I've still, you sit and you try to dive in on like what happened, and it's
yeah,
you go from being in the championship last year
yeah.
to not just missing the playoffs, but being 32 games out of your division is it's wild to me.
It's crazy. You wouldn't have thought that, right? But Christians have been around for a long time. He'll he'll come back.
Oh yeah,
And
he'll definitely be back.
yeah, he'll be back. But I think I'm in the near term more concerned with Duluth than Madison, but Madison probably a little bit more in long term. But I think I'll probably be rebuilding when he's competing for the division. Yeah.
Well, on that note, we better wrap this thing up
Yep.
considering I'm looking at the timer there, Sean.
Yep.
We're getting
Get
just
down
close
to
to
it.
a minute.
Cool. Well, I'll just thanks for having me, guys. The great conversation. Thanks for letting me blab about my team. It's one of my favorite things to do. So
Well, it was a
I
lot of fun for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you guys are doing this, continue on the podcast, and it's a great thing you're doing for the league. So I know we all appreciate it so much. So thanks for having
Thanks.
me.
Well,
No
thanks.
problem.
Well, with that, we'll close out and we'll talk to you all next time. See you guys.
Cool. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
From the highlands of Edinburgh to the Jersey Shore, we've got baseball like you've never seen before. In Reno, the desert heats up the play, while in Bakersfield we swing the night away. Welcome to the PEBA, where the world's our field. From the mountains to the cities, the action's never sealed. With gloves on and bats in hand, we're here to thrill. In the Planetary Extreme Baseball Alliance, we've got the skill. Tokyo, the pitches fly like neon lights. And down in San Antonio, the game ignites. From the beaches of Florida to the plains of Fargo, our league's the wildest, we won't refrain. Welcome to the PEBA, where the world's our field. From the mountains to the cities, the action's never sealed. With gloves on and bats in hand, we're here to thrill. We cross borders with our bats. Our game's a global feast, where every hit's an adventure, and every catch is a masterpiece. So tune in, sit back, and let's take the ride. With teams from every corner, we've got baseball worldwide. Worldwide, worldwide, worldwide. In Tempe, the sand's no match for our speed. And in Toyoma, the crowd's the game's true lead. From Aurora's cool breeze to the heat in Havana, we play with passion, we're the baseball globetrotters. Welcome to the PEBA, where the world's our field. From the mountains to the cities, the action's never ceased.